In the spiritual thing and the religious thing, relationships are always a big topic. What do? You're trying to be spiritual. You're trying to be religious. And you want sex. Well, folks, sex is natural. Let's get back to the basic reality again. Because all those old Dark Age religions have come up with all sorts of stories, myths, justifications about repressing and denying sex reality. 21st century religion doesn't give a crap about, the aspect of sex. It says it's normal to have a sex interest, and that sex interest is, whatever you want to do. The only parameters, of course, like throughout everything, is don't hurt other people. Don't rape. Don't abuse children. It should be kind of obvious things, right? Don't cause injury, abuse. If your passion is tied to something that's really abusive and like that, those weird kind of bondage things or other nothing, it kind of is showing you you got a weird kink in there when it's tied to injury, domination, control. Because really sex is, hey, let's be mutually interested. And that's about it. Look what nature provides. Nature gets people started really interested in sex. Oh yeah, boy. Ooh. When you're like, 14? 15 years old? You're still a kid in our current kind of cultural evaluations, But in older times, people at 15 and 16, they're having kids. They're running businesses. Look at the ages of guys like Alexander the Great, when they actually start doing stuff and they're really teenagers. King Henry VIII of England. Look how old he was. Actually, when he actually came in and started being a king. So things are just, that's just fluctuating. That's just relative stuff. Keep to the reality of nature provides with sex. It's normal. It's happy. It should be feel good. Have sex. Have a lot of sex. The key with sex and our 21st century ability is the ability to limit pregnancy. And you can really have, pretty easily, various men and women's systems that will inhibit pregnancy. Because that was the whole reality of the repression to make sex religious, was to say, don't have sex before marriage. You gotta only be married when you're gonna have sex. Geez, if you have sex outside of marriage, gosh, you're sinful. You're bad. You're going to a bad place. Gosh. It was all made up to inhibit people from having sex when they're naturally inclined to have sex, and they wanted to limit pregnancy of young kids. Because really, in our modern world, a 15-year-old as a mother is not a good idea. It isn't. But we can approach it instead of religion, saying, do this because this fake entity God is watching and going to be pissed off that that's you throw that away. That kind of made up justification. And you instead look at reality and say, look, in our world today, It is very difficult for a 15-year-old girl to be a mother and expected to have any kind of the maturity necessary to actually take care of kids. So we say, in a 21st century way, we don't rely on any myth. We just say, look, we're going to give you birth control when you get to this, age in there, because we anticipate, and it's okay if you have sex interest, but you're not going to get pregnant. You don't want to get pregnant. See, reality calls in, not myth. And who cares if you're heterosexual or homosexual? It doesn't matter. So what? These, once again, old Dark Age religions are filled with justifications of stupidity to block, repress women, and come up with some sort of myth and whatnot about denying homosexuality. Now, we're hearing this a lot, variously in Christian world, in fact, a lot in Catholic and Protestant crowd, and these religious wackos that are part of Republicans, the Christian fascists there. And they all come up with stuff about, that you got to throw all that crap away, because it's a hindrance, it's abusive, it's lies, it's fabrication to say, oh boy, religion is, oh gosh, it's these, oh boy, you do that and you're an, oh boy, you have sex outside of marriage, oh geez, you got me. Our reality is, even to the point about what is marriage. Marriage is a contract between two people who want to have some sort of setup where they're going to inherit property, buy things together, be mutually responsible, and be mutually responsible for children. That type of thing. That's really all marriage is. It's a contract. We don't care. Society of Sacred Flowers doesn't care if you're heterosexual or homosexual. It doesn't care if you get married at all, or if you want to get married, and realize what it is. It's a contract, a contractual arrangement, of which you make the terms. You decide, are you going to be monogamous or not? That's up to you. That's 21st century approach, because it's reality. Now, just like you hear in the background, a city at work, people doing stuff, having working, going out there and doing their thing. Well, that's kind of our current reality structure anyway. Okay, fine. And pervading throughout there is the reality of sex. Now, the reality of sex is also that prostitution has to be legalized, has to be legal. We take it away from criminal enterprise, and therefore we pull out all this billions of dollars going to crime organizations for the control of prostitution. And we take away things like sex, when you legalize prostitution, you get rid of things like sex trafficking. You get rid of sex abuse tied to prostitution. Because when it's illegal, just like the stupidity of making drugs illegal, the stupidity of making gambling illegal, all of that was religiously based stupidity. And all it did was create massive crime, problems, and suffering. Because you gave up control and you handed it over to criminal enterprise. And they ran the business. And they ran it, just like we see, for profit and to control, and in there is abuse and violence. So we get intelligent here, and we legalize prostitution just like we legalize drugs, so that we run the business, not criminal enterprise. And we're also acknowledging the reality of sex again. Sometimes you're single, you don't have anybody, you just want some sex. Get a prostitute. Fine. So what? Who cares? Now, another thing that comes up with prostitution and reality of sex is, look at, again, nature. Nature has women go into menopause. And it's somewhere around anywhere from in their later 30s into their 40s, right, generally, time frame. And it takes a few years to get through this thing. That's a big change in their system. And the reality is that over 60-some%, so far, there's been study on it, over 60-some% of women, once they get through menopause, they don't have any more sex interest. That's reality. And the reality is, wait a minute, if, let's say it's heterosexual and they have a spouse, a guy, right? Well, think of it, as many of you know, the guy is in his 40s as well. The wife in her 40s now has no sex interest. The guy in his 40s still has sex interest. That's reality. So the couple has to very clearly talk about, understand, what are they going to do? Are they just going to break up and divorce because of sex? What type of relationship have you got? Maybe you set it up so that you'd understand that the wife no longer has sex interest, so the guy goes out once a week, once a month, once a night, whatever, and gets a prostitute and just has sex. And in the meantime, still has his relationship and partnering with the spouse. Or the guy is maybe just has an actual affair, an ongoing affair with, surprise, surprise, a woman who's younger who still has sex interest. And the couple has to figure it out because it's reality. It will happen. Now, a lot of you have heard it, that there's a marriage, there's a divorce because the wife found out that the guy was having an affair. Now, in their 40s and whatnot, a question is always, the reality is, well, of course, he was having an affair because the wife wasn't interested in sex anymore. And he still did. So, that was the reason to break up the whole thing? Well, that goes back to the whole structure of the lunacy, actually, of the structure of marriage in the first place, that you're so dependent on monogamy that, if you just if you just have some sex on the side and, you got to break up the whole thing? That's silly. Doesn't say much about the depth of emotional understanding of what your partnership arrangement was. Doesn't say much about reality awareness. Because that's the fact of reality. That's nature doing its thing. And instead you've been relying on the blindness and delusions and fabrications of these dark age religions who lied to you, made things up to justify limitation and repression. So in the middle-age-ish kind of years, a lot of you are at that point, or hey, if you're younger, you should know it. You should know all about it. That coming down the road, when the woman gets into menopause, you got a real thing to make in your relationship, a choice to make in your relationship. You got to have some understanding. As over 60-some% of women, once they get through menopause, they don't have sex interest anymore. And that's their reality. That's their normal. It's okay. It's just, all right, that's where they're at. Where's the relationship structure? What do you guys decide? And you can tell there'd be a whole range of things, all of which, since you've mutually decided upon it, then that's okay. That's okay. And it's okay if you go out and the guy goes out and has an affair so that he gets his sex now and then and keeps the relationship going, because the wife still understands, just going out to get sex, and all right, but she knows that they have this understanding, this partnership arrangement. Or he just goes out once in a while to a prostitute and he gets sex. Okay, the couple still has their partnership, because they've talked about it. They've understood this thing. They've understood reality, not myth, not delusion. And that is 21st century aspect of religion, of spirituality, of awareness, is to appreciate the reality, the naturalness of sex. And to come out of that darkness of ignorance, intentional ignorance. There was all this hooga-booga and made-up stuff from those Dark Age religions. Throw them out. Throw them out. Society of Sacred Flowers doesn't hold to any of that old stuff. We say, 21st century awareness, intelligence says, look, there never was God. It was made up by ignorant people who didn't know anything about anything. They didn't know what a flood was. They didn't know what an earthquake was. Volcano. So they just, oh boy, oh jeez. They didn't know what disease was. So they made up stuff. And it made things fantastic, ghost-like, mythical, mysterious. And in there, they also made up the same kind of attitude, started to make up justifications for repression, societal structure. We kind of forget how in the few centuries ago here, and for a long time, religion was the whole thing. It defined government. It defined society rules. It justified the whole structure of society. It justified militarism and violence. Religion did. But in the 21st century, we've outgrown all that. We've outgrown religion's myths, Dark Age stuff of all types. You see it clearly. You see this world clearly. All you 21st century people, you know it. You get it. Well, if you still want a religious aspect, still want a way of living, a way of abiding, you could say, and a basic structure, say, that is somewhat like religion, well, Society of Sacred Flowers is right there. We point out the purpose of life. We point out what you do in life. We point out what is life. What is sex? What is the reality of culture? What's your purpose in life? Society of Sacred Flowers has it all. You can find it on the web. The web page, societyofsacredflowers.org. It's on Facebook. And here in these podcasts. And we go over, like we do here, like this, topics of the 21st century way of abiding. And sex is a big topic, like it always has been. Is a big topic that needs to be put in terms of 21st century reality, not Dark Age myth. We're throwing out that darkness and we are in the light of intelligence, of awareness. Here we are.